Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Florida-friendly landscaping educational program on this beautiful spring morning here at beautiful Hernando County Utilities. That's where my studio is located, here in beautiful unincorporated Hernando County on Highway 50. It's a beautiful, cool morning here on March 2nd. I'm thinking it's one of our last cool mornings. We might have another surprise one. Sometimes we get a surprise cool morning, like end of March, beginning of April. By cool, I mean 50s or something. It was in the 40s here this morning, which I appreciate because it was getting too hot too fast, in my opinion. But I enjoy this beautiful morning. So let's talk today on a really great subject that holds a lot of interest for a lot of people. I call it birdscaping. I don't think I made up the word. I probably saw it somewhere. Landscaping to attract birds to your yard. So welcoming feathered friends to your landscape. I am Lilly Browning. I do work for Hernando County Utilities in water conservation. My email, if you would like a PDF copy of this program when we are done, just email me and I'll be glad to send you one, because there's going to be some written information that you might not retain in your head. And instead of having to, take copious notes, which if you want to do that, that's great. I'll be glad to send you the PDFs. And my email is LillyB, LILLYB @hernandocounty.us. Here are the 9 principles of Florida-friendly landscaping. You can't miss these. Every class I teach, I show you these. And that's because everything that I teach, I am promoting one or more of these 9 principles. So today with birdscaping, we're, going to spend a lot of time on principle number 5. Which is, by the way, probably my favorite FFL principle. It's a lot of fun, and I think it's what we're, part of what the whole program is about. Okay, people keep coming in. So in this program today, a lot of the photographs that I'm using, you'll see her name by them. A friend of mine, Alice Mary Herden. She's a fantastic wildlife photographer. She does a lot of things here in the county. She freelances for a local newspaper, not just wildlife, sports photography as well. And she works at a local nature center here, part-time teaching educational classes about nature. So, and sometimes her and I take adventures, photography adventures. She's a billion times better than me. She has a lot better equipment than I do. So she has these wonderful photographs that I stole directly from her with her permission. So when we are talking about trying to attract birds to our landscape, sometimes we just have in our mind, because we don't understand, birds' life sometimes can be complicated too, just like ours. So they have different seasons. So your yard might serve different purposes. You can't just say, okay, here it is, come on in and move here forever. Birds are, obviously they're migratory. So you're going to get a revolving, ever ongoing movie, if you are, of things to watch in your yard. So birds have breeding seasons wherein they will act and look different than other times. Wintering, which is what we're all here, that's what Florida is here for lots of species to spend the winter, including human species as well. Or they might, it might be their migrating season. They might just be passing through during the fall or the spring migration. So your yard can be utilized for different purposes. Maybe your yard is going to end up being a breeding site. Maybe it's going to be a wintering site. Possibly just a stopover site. Like, they're just going to stop there like it's a Starbucks and visit their friends and move on from there. Or a dispersal site where it's actually a meetup place. Hey, we're all going to meet at Barb's house and then all gather, and then we're going to take off from there. It could accomplish any one, of those things. All these photos that Alice took, Alice Herndon, not my boss, Alice Brockway. I've got several Alices in my life, are from right around here in Central Florida. So these are birds very possibly to be seen right in our area. Now, birds, like every other living thing, require a habitat, just like we do. So every living thing, what defines a habitat? Well, you need food, cover or shelter, water, and you need the appropriate amount of space, for the species. So that's what a bird habitat entails. And how can our yards accommodate those habitats? Well, we can provide that food. We think in our minds that I want to attract birds, so I'm going to go to the store and buy a bunch of bird seed and get a bunch of bird feeders. Nothing wrong with doing that. In fact, that is, if you want the birds centered in one place where you can sit and enjoy them, or, if you like to take pictures of them, or you just want to sip your coffee and enjoy them out a big picture window, of course, you can attract them to that one spot with the various commercial seeds and things, and, the cakes and the little, the mealworms, things like that. But the rest of your yard should also provide for the birds and naturally. So you shouldn't rely just on what you can buy in the store. Your whole yard, that's what we're working on. Your whole yard should be a bird sanctuary. So even places that you don't normally see, you want to provide for these birds. So one of the easiest ways to provide food is to have lots of plants that provide fruit for those birds. Berry producing, fruit producing plants. And when we want to say that with a word of caution, because we're going to get into a little bit about invasive non-native plants, sure, that produce berries, and then the birds become unintentionally complicit in their spread. So we do have to be careful. And this particular class is about native plants. So, native plants that provide different types of fruit, just keep those in mind to have in your yard for the birds. Also, food can be provided by means of nectaring, especially for one of our favorites, the hummingbirds. People love to put up those hummingbird feeders, and there's good things and bad things said about those. Mostly, if you put in the solution, first of all, it's just kind of like candy. It's not all that nutritious for the hummingbirds. They're much better off going to what nature provided for them, the nectar in the plants. And if you don't keep on top of it, it can turn rancid and either make the poor birds drunk or make them quite ill. So, that's something you have to be on top of. And some of the really cheaply made ones, you really need to be careful, that look like red flowers and have the tube. Sometimes, those are not flexible like this sage is here, so they can get their beak stuck. So just, keep those things in mind, that it is much better to have natural things for your hummingbirds. And if you're going to see hummingbirds here, most likely, it is possible that you may see another type, but not as likely. You're you're most likely going to see a ruby-throated hummingbird in our area. But you put the right plants out there and they will come. If you feed them, they will come. We discussed going to the store and buying seeds, but what we don't think about is we have seeds in the yard, like these spent flowers here, and we may think, oh, they're ugly, let's just take them down. Well, wait a minute there, that's food for the birds. So sometimes we have to think, what happens in nature? No one comes and mows those down. So let them be there. The birds will take them. They will enjoy them. They may replant them elsewhere for you, or the wind may disperse them around and reseed the plants for you. If you are thinking about, which I have, bird seed as well. I know that I take the advice members of the Hernando chapter of Audubon who say the black oiled sunflowers seem to be the most eaten. A lot of times they'll just throw the other things out. So you're kind of wasting your money. So I just get the black oiled sunflowers. But as you see from this chart from the University of Florida, it tells you the different type of birds and the different types of feeders that they may enjoy. So again, if you want to see this, just ask me for a PDF of this and I'll be glad to share it with you. Now, this is where it gets touchy because we want the beautiful things in our yards. We want the birds, but we may not like insects. Well, guess what? The birds do like insects. You know why? Because they want to eat them, because they need that protein. So, you have to tolerate the insects in your yard. You're not going to invite company over and not feed them. And, a lot of birds do need protein. So not only insects, but small frogs, small lizards, some of the things that might have an ick factor for you. If you want the birds to come, you got to have that available for them. On the other hand, maybe they don't have an ick factor for you. Maybe you feel compassion towards those smaller critters and, don't want the birds to eat them. Especially if, and here's the really emotional part, caterpillars. If the caterpillars belong, our butterfly caterpillar. And here's all we have to say is out in nature, what's going to happen? Certain insects, certain caterpillars are going to be born and thrive and carry that species on. Others of them are going to provide a wonderful nutrient-filled meal for a baby bird so that species can thrive and go on. It's all the circle of life. And, that's the way it works in nature. So we have to accept that as well. I read a very interesting scientific article. I'm kind of holding on to it to kind of see what more universities have to say about it, but I know they're going to agree. And what they're having to say is, unfortunately, what's leading to the decline of the monarchs, not so much their loss of milkweed out there, but they carry a disease, they carry a protozoa on them. They just do naturally, but it's kind of gotten out of control. And what causes that disease on them, the spores, to be more prevalent is the mass rearing of butterflies that either we do or that we allow professional people to do, and then we order them like, for this funeral or something, we want these monarchs to be taken off. That's kind of perpetrating the disease. as well as the prevalence of non-native milkweed in our areas. So that's a whole different subject, but I say that to make you realize if you just let your butterfly rearing happen in your yard, where, yeah, they may get eaten by something, nature is always going to take care of itself. Water. All living things need water. Look at the upper left-hand corner of this photograph here. Isn't that amazing how she captured that? If you're going to provide water via a bird bath for your feathered friends, on behalf of Hernando County Mosquito Control, I just want you to be diligent with that bird bath. You know you. If you're not going to dump it out and clean it out and put new water in it every 4 to 5 days, then you might want to reconsider having a bird bath. And you might want to have a brush nearby so that when you clean it out, you brush along the sides here. Because sometimes the eggs can be stuck there, and if the water gets higher, and then, you know, they can hatch as long as they have the water. So every 4 or 5 days, you want to clean that water out to prevent mosquitoes, because there are some insects you probably don't want, you know, to hang around your yard. At least you don't want to attract bunches of them. If you are a human snowbird, I encourage you to, if you have a bird bath, please put it in your garage while you're gone, because it rains here all summer, and you know that could be a problem then for your neighbors. So anything that's going to hold water, you want to make sure is not hanging out in your yard when you're not. So the other thing is for the cleanliness of the birds. Anyone who knows birds very well knows, you know, what goes through them, kind of like all the time. So just for the health of the birds as well, it's a good thing to clean that water at least once a week, if not every 4 days or so, and replace it. So the shelter in our yards, and this is for attracting any wildlife. Diversity is the key, different types of plants. We're going to talk about native plants in a little bit, but different species of plants. Also diversity of shapes and sizes and lengths and widths, creating that vertical layering, creating those areas where the birds can hide, where they can shelter, where, you know, they can just feel more comfortable, and islands of vegetation, you know, so that you're not, no wildlife is going to be attracted to just an open lawn that's like an open pasture, an open field. They have to have that vegetation. So you can have the lawn, but if you have islands of vegetation as well, that's where your wildlife is going to be. On the other hand, and this is just kind of, we'll get to this when we talk about domestic animals. You might want to put your bird baths or your bird feeders more out in the open so that the feral cats don't hide and, you know, kind of ambush them. That's just another thing to think about. More shelter, ground covers. Lawns, you know, this looks like Bahia grass here. It's in good shape. You know, as long as you're not putting a lot of chemicals or using too much water or too many, you know, human inputs, if it's the right plant, right place, that's great. But we don't have to have all lawns. So we can limit, especially the manicured lawn. And if you have a, you know, a large yard and you're not in a deed restricted community that has very specific rules of how you keep your yard, you can set a portion aside, and all you really have to do is don't mow it. And you will be surprised all the pollinators that you're going to attract. Have you ever like sat on the side of the road at a traffic light and the strip there that, you know, the county or the state hasn't gotten around to mowing yet? I always like when that happens because there's so many different quote weeds coming up, but take a look there next time at all the pollinators on there. And of course, the pollinators are going to attract the birds. You might want to be very clear and specific about why you're not mowing there. Maybe put a border around it, something like that, so it looks intentional as well. A couple other things, if you don't have a small yard, if you have a big enough yard, snags. What's a snag? It is a dead tree, basically a dead tree trunk that, you may look at and think, oh, it's got to come down. Well, if it's not going to fall on anything important, does it really have to come down? If it's out in a field, out in the woods, because let me tell you, these snags are condominiums for wildlife, for all the insects. That's why your downy woodpecker is on this one. For lizards, eagles like to perch on top of them. They are just very, very well used. If your yard is too small for that, but you're allowed to have some brush piles from some cleaning up that you may do and just create an area of brush, there's another thing that all of the wildlife is going to enjoy. And yeah, I mean all of the wildlife. Yeah, it could be snakes, could be, but it all works together. It's also going to attract squirrels and birds and lizards and their food and insects and all kind of wonderful things. Sometimes we think, we want certain birds to come, but we may not realize we don't have adequate space. Here's a swallowtail kite. It's here in Hernando County. Some of the larger birds do need more space, not just your yard, but the avenue, the air avenue to your yard. That could be why they're not coming to yours. It may not be the right habitat for them. And if you want to learn about how birds select habitat, there is a PDF for that. You can just Google how birds select habitat, and you can put Hostetler. He works at the University of Florida and has all kinds of publications on attracting birds. So Dr. Hostetler is a great resource, but check out this particular PDF to find out, about the spatial issues and attracting birds. Now, sometimes things around you may have changed and you did not change anything, but it affects what birds come to you. Case in point, I have a sister who lives in Massarik Town. She had bluebirds every year. She had the nest for them, the house for them to nest in, no problem coming. Well, but she lives where, outside of Trillium, but Massarik Town, and what went through the middle of that, the new Ayers Road extension. And now it is across her Lime Rock Road, little patch of woods, boom, there's the road. So all that construction, all that change. And then she was saying to me, where are my bluebirds? They haven't come. I told her they had no idea how to get there. They were lost because of how her neighborhood changed. The good news is they eventually did come. They just came later. So, sometimes things are out of your control as well. I mentioned the feral cats, but let's talk about our pets. I don't think anyone listening here, I always feel like I'm preaching to the choir because, you're all naturalists. You're not going to release exotic pets into the wild. We all know what a big mess that can turn into. If you want pythons, that's how you get pythons in the Everglades, by releasing these exotic pets. Iguanas, you want iguanas falling out of trees, that's how you get iguanas falling out of trees. Tegu lizards, same thing. But let's talk about our domesticated everyday, animals, are dogs and cats. I mentioned feral cats before. There's not a whole lot you can do about them, except, there are programs to get them sterilized, and that's good, so they don't keep producing other generations. But, sometimes you're going to have to decide, do I put out food for the feral cats? Because, you have a lot of compassion for them, and then wonder why you don't have any birds. Sometimes you need to make that decision. Which one do you want? But if you have your own cat, and we just try to encourage everyone. Years ago, we all had outside cats or outside cats. And it was normal for your cat to go visit the neighbor and for your cat to bring you a squirrel, something like that. But you know what they say, when you know better, do better. And of course, there's more of them out now, and we are more cognizant of the harm they can cause to wildlife. So, and don't think, well, my cat is so fat and lazy, it's not going to go out and hunting. Cats don't hunt because they're hungry. Cats hunt because cats hunt. So keep Kitty inside. And even your dogs, your dog, if they are a predator type dog who is very interested in the wildlife that's out there, you're going to want to be out there with them so you can control what they're doing. So that's, what we can do with our own domesticated pets. The other thing is pesticides and wildlife are not a good mix. That sounds kind of obvious just hearing it out loud, but, we may not think about it when we have our guy come over and spray everything, or we ourselves, or someone in our house may, well, it's this time of year, I'm going to just spray this all over. A couple things could happen. You could hurt your birds directly if you have too many pesticides, or you can kill off their food so they have nothing to eat, or you could have them eat something poisonous and ingest that poison. So if you have a problem like with, say, fire ants or wasps or something very specific, and I mean paper wasps, hanging from your porch, then spot treat that problem with the correct product. That is what we encourage. We do not by any means encourage broadcast spraying your whole yard with a pesticide. You're wondering, why can't I get any wildlife? Think back on your routine or what happens in your yard. That very well could be a reason why. I alluded a little earlier to some of these invasive non-native plants, and this is only 3 of them. Oh man, there are whole lots of others, and I just recently did a class on some of the invasive non-native plants. It was a class called This, Not That, encouraging you to trade your invasive non-native for a similar and very much nicer native. And I even put some Florida-friendly non-natives suggestions in there as well. For purposes of this class, we're just going to talk about these 3. This one is heavenly bamboo. You might have it in your yard right now. You may see it. Maybe your church has it. Somebody has it. Nandina is the other name for it. It is an invasive non-native. It can take over areas. Now, with any of these, you might say, well, I have it in my yard and it's not spreading. And so I ask of you, since we're talking about birds, I ask of you, how many of you control where the birds go after it's in your yard? They're going to eat those berries for sure. And then that bird is going to replant these type of plants in wooded areas. Now, the nature of an invasive non-native is that it's from somewhere else, and it does find somewhere else where nature intended it for it to be. But we take it to other places where it does not have checks and balances. It does not have diseases. It doesn't have insects that keep it under control. So it grows crazy, out-competing our native plants. Some critters adjust, some do not. So it really upsets the balance of the whole ecosystem. So if you have this Nandina, and we're talking specifically about birds, I have heard that the berries can be poisonous for birds. And my first thoughts were, I think birds are a little bit smarter than that. They're not going to eat poisonous berries. But then I learned, about such birds that very much like the cedar waxwings. If you know cedar waxwings, they travel in very large flocks. They come down, they eat everything in sight, and then they move on. Ask our blueberry farmers. They know all about those. So they'll do the same thing with this Nandina. So one bird comes and takes one berry. Yeah, not a problem. Might feel like, ooh, that made me sick. I don't want to eat that again. But there are other types of birds that just come and just devour everything. So then they eat so many of these, the toxins build up. They get, a toxic amount of these toxins. So if you don't, believe about these Nandina spreading, at least protect the birds. And, you might want to replace those with something else. This is called coral Ardesia. Very pretty. I never once will tell you that invasive non-native plants are not pretty. Nature didn't make very many ugly plants that I'm aware of. It's the fact that they're the wrong plant in the wrong place. This coral Ardesia gets confused sometimes with wild coffee, which is a native, which I'm going to show you in a little bit. But if you look, it's much narrower, shiny, waxier leaves, and it has a really, really scallop edge, this coral Ardesia, and you'll see the difference in the wild coffee. This you may have right in a pot in your in front of your house, asparagus fern. But remember, the birds are going to take those berries. It's going to plant them elsewhere. It's also very sticky, you know that. So squirrels or other things could get seeds stuck on them and plant them around. One of the good news is a very similar version, a cousin of this, like the weeping asparagus fern. You can get the foxtail fern, have almost the same look and not have an invasive plant. So, and there's many, many, many. The more you get rid of them, the better off your wildlife will be. And native plants in general, it's pretty much, if you really sit down and think about it, what was here before the rest of us. Native plants and native animals, that's right. They had a great ecosystem. They had a great synergy going on there. So you may decide, I'm going to go all native. And you may not even be thinking about wildlife, but guess what? You're going to have the wildlife. Native plants are going to attract the wildlife. And they do attract more insects, more pollinators. And why is that? Well, we as humans, are amazing creatures that really move forward in life. And we cause evolution to happen faster than it really happens with the animals. So some of these hybrids and disease-resistant, insect-resistant plants that we create are not recognizable to the pollinators as plants. So native plants are going to attract more insects. Once, they don't require pesticides if they are the right plant in the right place. They provide that plant diversity as long as you don't have all of the same plant. And you can find out information from the Florida Association of Native Nurseries. I have resources at the end as well. I don't want people to be overwhelmed, with what I just said, that, oh, I want to go all native. You don't have to do that. This yard is all native and it is in the villages. That's an amazing concept, isn't it? If you look up on YouTube, flip my Florida yard, and then look for going native in the villages. You'll see this yard and who owns it and it's a really cool video to watch. But if I always say, if every single one of us went out and bought 5 native plants this year, how much would that benefit, our ecosystem? So, take it a little at a time if you have to. And let's talk about the native plants that are for the birds. Native plants are for the birds. That is absolutely true. One of our favorite and easiest to take care of, easiest to find. I've never had to buy a beautyberry. They grow naturally in my yard where I live, and I've been replanting them. I can make them look into very nice civilized trees in the civilized area of my yard, or let them grow wild in the more natural area of my yard. They're naked right now because they're deciduous, but pretty soon, very soon, like maybe tomorrow, they'll start budding out and have either pink or white kind of flowers. And then in the fall, have these absolutely beautiful berries, hence their name, beautyberry. American beautyberry is the more formal name for it. Wonderful plant and easy, so easy to grow, really hard to mess up actually, and pretty easy to find as well. Spotted horse mint, you can find seeds for these. They do grow naturally where I live. And I've been trying to save some of them before every single lot gets cleared and a house gets put on it. But I'll probably have better luck with, purchasing seeds. But spotted horse mint or the bee balm, not that interesting looking until they start to bloom, and then they're pretty fascinating. But they attract butterflies, bees, and the birds. Chickasaw plum, becoming more and more popular because our native dogwoods have been in trouble for years. So if you're driving around near the woods right now and you see white flowers, it's probably either this Chickasaw plum, hog plum. They're so close. They're like, very close cousins to each other. Or you may see Walters viburnum. That's blooming like crazy right now too. The problem with dogwoods is several things. Years and years ago, in the eastern, part of the counties, Brooksville, Dade City, Inverness, those type of inner towns in the oak hammocks, they had beautiful dogwoods. They had beautiful red buds. You can still get those things, but they're not going to thrive as well. Dogwoods all over the country have been suffering with the disease, and anthracnose disease. The other thing is here in Hernando County, we were always at the southern edge, pretty much, of their, and Pasco. We're at the southern edge of their growing range. Well, a few degrees hotter each year for a few days longer makes just that much difference, adding on top of the other stresses that dogwoods are not faring that well. So you want a white blooming tree, your Chickasaw plum is the way to go. You can find them at native nurseries. They can be tamed very well to even be a street tree. And you might get plums. If you let them go and you want them to spread, they'll sucker to make a nice thicket. I'm going to have to get some to do that. You might get some plums, but good luck feeding the birds to them. But that's what this program is about. It's letting the birds have them. Honeysuckle, coral honeysuckle is our native honeysuckle with the beautiful red tubular flowers. And again, what are we going to get from that? Of course, we're going to get our hummingbirds. We're going to get our long-tongued bees and some butterflies as well. And it grows pretty easily. And I think it's a whole lot prettier than the Japanese honeysuckle. Now, here's something that I hadn't really been pushing. There's two old trees that I'm talking about in this program that are enjoying more people taking an interest in them again, you know, how things kind of roll around. So elderberry is one of them. Let me say this, if you have a small yard, don't think about elderberry, because this is something you're going to put in the back for several reasons. Now, the birds absolutely love them. But think about the elderberries and the birds eating them. So no, you don't want them in your front yard, unless you want your purple packages, you know, all over your driveway and your car and all of that. So this is for someone who has a lot of space, and you put it somewhere in the back for the birds to enjoy. It's also kind of weak. So, and it's not all that, it's kind of spindly, you know. So again, great for the birds, but not all that attractive, and certainly not all that fun with the birds eating the berries and then depositing the purple packages in your front yard. So you want some space if you want to consider having elderberry. Firebush, wonderful bush to have. Yep, mine's frozen too, but it's going to come back. That's what they do. They come back, and they have the red tubular flowers that your hummingbirds are going to love. Mine last summer was attracting hummingbirds. I never saw them. My husband, who was recently retired, would tell me about them, but they chose the time of day to come when, you know, I have this job thing, you know, that's why I'm sitting here. So I didn't get to see them, but I always saw a lot of sulfur butterflies around them. If you want to make absolute sure you get the native firebush, look at that Latin name, the Hemilia potens. That's your native. Your native plant purists, you know, will want you to get the native because it is much more efficient at attracting the wildlife. Any kind of holly has those berries that's going to attract the birds. This picture is of a Dahoon holly. There are Yopon hollies. Even the, you know, either the native cross breeds like the East Palatka holly, or even the non-native hollies. They're all Florida friendly. They're going to attract birds for shelter as well as for food for you. And they make nice small trees, nice hedges. Here's another one you want to put back with your elderberry, your mulberries. Mulberries are enjoying a resurgence in popularity. Be very, very, very careful not to confuse it with the invasive non-native paper mulberry, or you will hate me forever for getting one. But the red and the black mulberries are native. Mulberries, as I said, are enjoying a resurgence. Everyone wants the fruit. But the thing about mulberry fruit is it is not marketable. It's not transferable. They have not found a way to make it last once it's picked to get to the shop and then to your house. It's just mush by then. So if you want the berries, you got to have the tree yourself. That direct yard to table process there. So, but again, they're weak. Don't get a male. Please do not get a male, or you'll have a lot of allergen problems. But you want the berries anyway. They're weak, and also the birds, these gray catbirds, they love them. Not a front yard tree, unless you want mulberry packages again all over your driveway. And also a weak tree. So again, this is for someone who has a lot of space and to put it way back for the birds to enjoy. Passion vine, beautiful, beautiful flowers. And you may have this and it may have frozen back, but it'll come back. It's an aggressive vine because it's native. We refer to it as pioneering. But it never takes over ecosystems. It might take over your plant bed. But it attracts two types of butterflies, the zebra longwing, which is our native butterfly, our state butterfly. as well as the Gulf fritillary and many different types of birds. So it's you know, you need a good, strong support system for it and let it do its thing. Pawpaw is another native. It's not going to cause, you know, like purple package problems or anything, but a little bit of litter problems. But it's kind of a spindly looking tree, so it's not going to be, you know, one that you show off in the front yard. But it's a host for our zebra winged swallowtail butterfly. A lot of times these do grow naturally. I have one growing in the middle of a palmetto bush in my backyard. These have tap roots like you won't believe. And one of the reasons I know that is because I thought, oh, look at the beautiful pawpaw. I'll pull it up and put it somewhere else where it can grow better, so I thought, and be more of a showcase. No, it died. But you know what? It comes back every year out of that palmetto bush. And I'm like, okay, fine. That's where you want to be. That's where you're going to be. The birds are going to enjoy you regardless. Now, our Sable Palm does attract many different types of birds. Let me let you know, though, that our Sable Palms, our cabbage palms, are in trouble, which is really sad because it is a native palm. It's our state palm tree. It's a palm that should grow in Central Florida, you know, up through North Florida, very, very, very well. But they are experiencing a terrible disease called lethal bronzing. Once your palm has it, it's vectored by, you know, psyllid, an insect that injects a fungus which clogs up all the pores, basically. So it cannot transfer, you know, food or water. And sometimes they know how to prevent it with antibiotics, and I'm not in favor of using antibiotics for trees. Some people are, some people aren't. I am not. I don't think that's an ethical practice. But, you know, places like Disney or resorts or whatever that want to save their trees before it gets this, they may consider that practice. Once it has it, you just have to take it down so that your other trees won't get it. So I guess what I'm saying here is if you have a tree, keep it because the birds love it, but keep an eye on it. But don't spend money, a good amount of money, purchasing a cabbage palm right now till the scientists can get a hold of this disease. Scarlet Salvia is our native salvia. There's many different sages that will attract many different insects as well, but this is self-spreading, and so it'll keep coming back year after year. It really blooms all year until it, you know, kind of suffers with the freeze, not really, and then it's going to end up coming back. Simpson stopper is a great hedge. It makes a good, you know, kind of a big hedge, spreads very well. It has these red berries. Why is it called Simpson stopper? Because the native people used it like a, you know, like, you know, somebody had issues with their belly, you know, to help kind of clear things up. I don't know how to do that. Do not go out and eat your Simpson stopper. But all kind of birds love this. Buntings, cardinals, blue jays, mockingbirds, you know, and a great spreading, great screening bush. Wax myrtle can make a nice small tree or nice hedges. I tell everyone who's considering replacing their you know, really stringy, ugly 10-year-old ligustrums, replace them with the wax myrtle. I mean, the yellow rumped warbler loves them. The tree swallows love them. They attract many different types of wildlife. Just a much better little tree or shrub to have. Here's the wild coffee that some people confuse that coral Ardesia. You can see the leaves are much wider and they're much more grooved, but less scalloped along the edges. This it grows naturally in the woods and some shady areas. So if you have some shade, that's a great plant to put there. One of my favorite Latin names, well, it's wild coffee. So Psychotria nervosa. That's one of my favorite Latin names, but I don't know how to make it into coffee. I am not the edible plant person. You need to find somebody else with that. I'm just going to tell you don't eat any of it because I don't want to get in trouble. The saw palmetto. I guess I just shortened its name, the palmetto. So many people move here and have this naturally left in their yards. Like where I live, you usually get a half an acre, and sometimes, at least they always used to, would leave the back quarter acre totally natural. Well, what everyone wants to do is, get rid of those palmettos. To me, it's like, well, here's a free plant, so it must not be any good. And also, I have, several different types of groups of people that I deal with. And what I find the most interesting are this might be a surprise to you, but are the native Floridians, because they have, and my husband is one, they have come up with preconceived ideas also, from living here forever. So what they think about the saw palmetto. Probably most of you know. Yes, rattlesnakes live in them. They could. So could many other different types of snakes. So could snakes live in any kind of bush that provides shelter. So yeah, don't just go rolling around in there. Be careful. But let me tell you about all the different wildlife that provides homes to. I mean, the crested caracara, the Florida burrowing owl, the Florida sandhill crane, sand skinks, mice, so many birds, scrub jay, which is a threatened species. Black bears feed on these palmettos. The deer come for them. There are, I think I heard somewhere, something like 400 different types of wildlife can make a living, really, in your saw palmetto. So just keep that in mind. In our backyard, we have a small fenced-in area where the above-ground pool is, but the fenced-in area is where our tiny little 8-pound doglets run around. Just off from there, we keep those saw palmetto bushes cut down just because we don't want coyotes having hiding places there. Further in the back and in the lot that we just purchased next to us, we leave it there so that all this wildlife, can enjoy it. Here's some other things that you're like, okay, now you're just showing me weeds. Well, yeah, I am, but let me tell you, these weeds attract a whole lot of wildlife and pollinators, which are also going to attract the birds. The Spanish needle, love-hate relationship. I hate how aggressive it is. I hate the sticker things it puts on me, but I love the pollinators that it attracts. So I just try and keep it under control. Dayflower, as well as this, the Florida violet as well. Sometimes I just read somewhere that, weeds are flowers too, once you get to know them. And we have whole classes on that. Blanket flower is another great bird and butterfly attractant. I'm letting everyone know I included it on this native plant list, but unfortunately, poor blanket flower has been kicked off of the native plant team, which is so sad. But through DNA testing or whatever it is they do, they have determined that the big orange, big face, beautiful blanket flower was not here in 1500. That's the line that we draw. When when Europeans came over around thereabouts and settled in, that's when we decided that's when you can be called a native plant if you were here prior to that. And they decided blanket flower wasn't. Don't take it out of your native, garden. Don't take it out of your wildflower garden. Plant it Plant it as much as you want. It's a beautiful, wonderful plant. So we'll go quickly through this. And again, you can ask for the PDF to get this. So I'm just kind of showing you something you can do, you know, in writing. So if you want to plan your sanctuary around your yard, so the first thing you want to do, and it's not going to look this good, mine would not look this good, but draw your house and the other structures, and then just kind of put blobs where this is shady, this is sunny, this is wet, this is dry. We want to keep that in mind. Certainly the one I draw is not going to look this good, but draw in what you already have, the plants that you already have, unless you plan on getting rid of them. And also then add in the hardscape, the fences, the patio, the pool, sheds, things like that. So you know what you're dealing with. Then add the basics. What is it that you want? You already drew in what you have. Now, what do you want? Do you want a bird viewing area from the breakfast nook? Is this over here a good area to put your brush pile? Is way in the back a good area to put your elderberry and your mulberry and your snags? Keep the snag there. Where do you want the fruit bearing plants? Where do you want tall plants? Where do you want short plants? You know, you notice you're not naming plants yet. This is just very basic of the kinds that you want. And where do you want the islands of plants to be? Then we can get into details. I listed here just the plants that we talked about today. Maybe those aren't the plants you want to use. Maybe there's some of the plants you want to use. Maybe you want to use different plants. So of course you're going to have your own list. And that's when you're going to input them then on your worksheet that you have created. This is just to help you. And also consider the plant's needs, not just your own. Remember, we went back to shady, sunny, hot, dry, you know. Also look up what type of area the plant needs to thrive in. That Chickasaw plum wants to be an understory tree. You know, all those, the wild coffee is going to want to be in the shade. Keep those things in mind as well. Here are some of the resources that I used. Again, please email me, LillyB@hernandocounty.us if you have any questions or if you'd like a PDF. Also, Florida Friendly Landscaping has all kinds of information on attracting wildlife to your yard. So look up floridayards.org for that information. FloridaWildflowers.org. That's a really cool website that talks to you all about the different Florida wildflowers, not exclusively native, but a lot of them are. And from there, you can also find a link to FloridaYardFlowers.com or Florida Wild Growers Association. You can actually order seeds. Florida Native Plant Society, they're one of your best places to go to find out information. And I believe our Hernando chapter is having a native plant sale soon. I believe it'll be at Chinsegat Hill. So look up either their webpage or their Facebook page, Hernando chapter of the Florida Native Plant Society. Find out when their spring plant sale will be. I believe it's coming up either this Saturday or next. It's coming very soon. And if you want to know where to find different native plants, what nurseries have them, this is where you're going to go, to the Florida Association of Native Nurseries. When you go out looking for specific native plants, it's not as easy as going to Lowe's or Home Depot most of the time. It requires a search. It requires an effort. So, but when you do that, you can make day trips to go to area, you know, native plant nurseries that might have what you want. Groveland has, you know, quite a number of them. Go anywhere you want in Central Florida if you live in Hernando County. I would not encourage you to go to Leon County. I would not encourage you to go to Brevard County. Stay in your area if you want plants that will thrive in your yard. Florida Hernando Audubon Society, they have a lot of good information. I just gave them this presentation last week. And gardening for the birds. Here is a where you get some of the design considerations I just gave you. And also Doug Tallamy, I think everybody probably knows of him, and he's got a great book, Bringing Nature Home, How You Can Sustain Wildlife with Native Plants. Now he's going to be talking a lot about his home in Pennsylvania, but the principles remain the same. And again, go to YouTube and look up Going Native in the Villages. Again, that's my email, LillyB@hernandocounty.us. I also, if you go to Hernando County Government YouTube, many classes that you'll find of mine on there. A lot of them dealing with attracting wildlife or invasive non-native plants, anything along that line. There's more than 70 classes there. You can get lost for days there. I do have upcoming classes that I forgot to put in this slide, but that's okay because I have Facebook on my phone. So I'm looking at Hernando County, Florida Friendly Landscaping, and you can look there under events. Next Tuesday, I have a rain barrel and compost in-person class. If you're interested in that, anytime I have a rain barrel or compost combo class, it starts at my email. If you don't email me, I don't know you're coming and you don't get on the list. So that's how you do that. March 16th and March 23rd, both Wednesdays. Dr. Lester from Hernando County Extension will be joining me. We'll have a part 1 and a part 2 on gardening, Florida gardening mythology. All these weird things that people think. March 26th, I have an outdoor compost and rain barrel workshop at Ridge Manor Park. If that interests you, please email me. That's how it starts. And on March 30th, I think people listening to this class will really like the class coming up on March 30th, 10 a.m. Wednesday, just like now. Be specific. Flowers and plants that attract native bees. That's going to be a fun one. So thank you, everybody, for joining me today. And again, if you have any questions, any comments, would like a PDF, please feel free to email me. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful Florida-friendly day.